load. Okay, welcome to checking your story, step-by-step story development. Today's lecture is intended to build off the previous lecture, story development, story and character development, where you're going to take your idea and you're going to see if there is more that you can actually do with this idea. If there is, if there's actually potential for you to take this story from just a concept, an idea, and actually see if there's a potential of having scenes. What you will do, what this lecture will allow you to do is give us more than just a quick summary, the elevator pitch. This will allow you to really think through and eventually talk through your story. When you're going to give me, those of you who are going to be pitching, this will be crucial when you're pitching, because you should be able to hit some major turning points in your story in a real pitch. And so this is important for that. I'm going to share my screen right now, so you can see the lecture that we're talking about. All right, so here's what we went over last week, and it was story and character development. You should have one, maybe two ideas that you've run through this. And you should always, whatever idea, before you go to the next step, which is what's going to be today, you should always run them through this matrix. Number one, what kind of story are you telling? What is it? What's it called specifically? When you pitch on Monday, you're going to tell me the title. What's new or unique about it? If it's like another film, how is it different? Right? Remember, if you're going to compare it to a film, it should be a critical or a box office success, right? And then I want to know the genre, at the hook. What is this? Is this action, comedy, drama, horror, animation, right up front? Then you're going to slip right into, who do we care about? Who is the dramatic engine? Who is the character who needs something, who causes the story to happen? Who is this character? What is this character's name? What is about how old of this character? And as we talked about in character development, you do with all of your characters, what type of person is this? Is this a overly enthusiastic screenwriting instructor? Is this a passive student? What type of character is this, right? And then most importantly, you're going to go right into, what is the goal? What is your character's hero's goal? And this will shape your entire story. This will allow us, the lecture that I'm going to move it today, this will allow us to really see the parts, be specific, right? Remember, could be about finding love, getting boy, getting girl, right? Get a bicycle, a specific task, one night to do something, 9 months to make a decision what to do with a baby. Something as specific as you can, and let us know what's at stake, right? The best goals have an end that we can see in your pitch. The one night to sign the drug pledge, 3 days to get to Little Miss Sunshine, right? That I can see in your pitch. What's going to give your story heart, though, is the need. What does your character need to change about themselves or this world? Sunshine, father needs to learn how to become a real father, right? What is the dramatic need, right? You're going to say that right on your pitch. My hero wants this, but needs to change this about themselves or about their world, right? And then you're going to tell me, do you have a problem or a villain story, right? This problem needs to be overcome. We need to find the groom and get to the wedding on time. This villain, Darth Vader, needs to be defeated. Apollo Creed needs to be beat in a ring, right? Is it a problem or a villain story? We should know this right up front, right? I'm not going to review the character development, right? But all of your characters, anybody who you talk about in your pitch, should have complete development, meaning you do not bring up a person in your pitch, right? You're going to give me a list of 6 characters next Wednesday, and all of the characters will have names, types, what their function is, what the relationships are, and what their goal is in the story, right? This is the basic. You want to run all your characters through this. We want to run our story through this so you can talk about your story. And if you do this, you should be able to write one of these paragraphs that we reviewed last week. You should give me a nice synopsis, right? But the synopsis and the character list is not enough to write a story. And it's really not enough to get me to buy your pitch. This is where we're going for today, and this is what the lecture will be for today. It's checking your story, step-by-step story development. This is a series of questions asked of you about your story in order of not importance, but in chronological order of what you need to consider as you're developing your story. Now, this lecture that I'm giving to the majority of you is to help you actually develop your story. Can you see what your characters are actually doing? Can you see scenes? Can you see significant moments? Are there concepts that will help you understand and deepen your story, right? But some of you watching this are trying to fix screenplays that aren't done, that are maybe just a first act, maybe a first draft, right? All of these concepts are key, right? Are key and can help you fix and solve script problems. So again, this lecture has dual purposes. Number one, hey, you've now come up with an idea. You've got it down to a nice clean synopsis, right? Where we figure out what it is. But now we're going to see, can you, as you're talking about it, can you expand it? And this will let you know if you can't imagine your inciting incident, if you can't imagine how your story starts, if you can't imagine how your story locks in, right? Maybe this is what you're learning, that you do not have a command of this world. You do not have command of these characters. And what that says is not that you can't write this story, but maybe you can't write this story now. You need to do some more research, right? But this is sort of if you can't answer a lot of these questions, or you can't work your way through a lot of these questions, you're probably going to have to do some more research. Now, unfortunately, for a class as short as this, we don't have time to do the research, right? If this is a high concept movie, if this is a sci-fi movie, if this is a, some sort of action thriller that is going to require more time of you studying a field. We only have 10 weeks in this class, and you're not going to be able to do it. And that's when I'm going to suggest you shift into one of those story ideas that any of us can write. Those story ideas that any of us could write, and that is the coming of age story, right? The Dazed and Confused, the John Hughes story, or the dysfunctional family story. We all can write the family going from function to dysfunction, or dysfunction to function. The change in the family that becomes better or worse, right? Or especially since most of you are film majors, the dream. I'm going to, not me, but your character wants to pursue something that seems impossible, wants to be an artist, right? Wants to be an astronaut, wants to be the heavyweight champion of the world, wants to follow an impossible dream, the dream story. Those are the three areas that you can mine quickly. And as you're going through this class, and as you're going through this pitch, right, you should be developing, all of you should be developing a story for the class, but you should have something that you can immediately select scenes. And this is what this is. This is a test. How well do you know it? Now I'm going to go step by step here, and I'm going to apply everything that we've talked about in the first two lectures to these questions. And these are questions that you should, and these are questions that you should consider in order. Number one, the beginning of your story, right? The first, let's say, 5 scenes of your story, five scenes of your story before something happens, before there's a change, an inciting incident, right? There's going to be an inciting incident that's going to cause your movie to happen. But before that happens, right? These are the types of scenes that are important, right? Whose story is this? In the first scene in the movie, I want to see who the character is before the story starts. This is where you show us what's wrong with this character, what the character needs. You show a scene like in Little Miss Sunshine, where the father is trying to give a motivational speech and nobody's in the room and nobody cares, right? You show the scene where Napoleon is all alone and doesn't have any friends. You show the scene, right, before the event that's going to happen, right? So what is your character like? What is your character like? What is your character's world like? And this is really something that you should consider, because this is going to be the beginning of the journey. And the last scene in the movie is going to be when it's going to show the change. It's going to show your arc, but it's really important, right? And then in addition to who, where, where does your story start? Does it start at home, like Sunshine at Home, and it ends at the pageant? Where? I mean, do you know where your story starts? And let's say you're doing a high concept. This is a high concept movie. Right off the bat, I need to know the rules of this movie. If it's a superhero movie, if it's an action movie, these are like when you see the James Bond, the Indiana Jones movie, the superheroes who are established movie, we typically see what they are capable of. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the story, but we get to see what superpowers your characters have. We get to see what the rules are, right? So if you have a high concept a movie, let's say you have like an Incredibles movie, this is where we see the Incredibles. We see the superheroes before they're told they can't use their superpowers. We see what they're capable of. When, right? This is something you should consider. When does your story take place? Is this something that is happening now? Is it contemporary? Right? Is this something that's happening now? If it is happening now, this is the first time, really these last 2 years is the first time. Now is very different than now had been, let's say, through 2013 to 2020, right? That now was all kind of the same. Now is very different, right? If we go back to 2019, right, or early 2020, the world is very different. So when? For you, it matters. It matters as you're pitching the story, and it matters, and it gives us an expectation is when, what's the era, what's the year. If it's a period piece, I want to know right up front, what type of story this is, what scene it, this is the Old West, it's the end of the Old West. I talked about Butch and Sundance. This is as the West is coming to an end, 1915, something like that. What, right? And I address this. What does your hero need to change, right? That's what the who and the what kind of goes right together. And you need to give us a reason right up front why we're rooting for your hero. Why should we care? What are the stakes? This is where, as you're in your pitch and as you're developing your story, this is where you show us why we should like this person. Now, in most of your scripts, we have to have something that we like about your character. We want to be able to root for your character. So it's really crucial that you consider all of these questions as you're beginning to select your scenes, right? Whose story is this? What does this person need to change? What world does this take place? When does it take place? And why should I care? That's a scene. I need a scene that shows that. So you're gonna be tempted to give us lots of scenes that show that. And this is where you go wrong. You give me, 10, 15, 20 scenes, and a scene's going to be, 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 3 pages. I don't want more than 5. 5 scenes will give us about, 15 minutes, right, of establishing where we are, who we care about, why we care about them, and what's at stake, right? But think about it as you're examining your story right now. Ask yourself all these questions: the who, where, when, what, and why. They seem obvious, but if you can't answer these questions, it's going to be very hard for you to come up with a story. It's going to be very hard for you to show us why this character wants what he, she, or they want, and why and how they will change, right? So those are very, very crucial questions for you to dig in. And you should be thinking about them right now as I'm speaking. You should be thinking of everything that I talked about. Who is this main character? Now you have your 6, you're choosing the one, and you're gonna give us a scene that sets up, this is the one we care about, and this is where this person is. This is when, this is when, and this is what, and this is the why. And you're building to something, right? You're building to something very specific here. You're building to a thing that we call the inciting incident. Now, I'm going to say I don't like the title, the inciting incident. And a colleague of mine, we just had a discussion, and this is what we call it in the business. This is the incident that incites the movie, right? The inciting incident. To me, it sounds like something that is wrong with you. It sounds like a medical procedure. But there is an incident, there is a moment, there is a scene that causes the story to happen. One way you can think about it, this is where the story begins. This is where the real story begins. This is where the movie begins. And again, remember, you don't start your movie here. You have to show us the character and what the character needs to change before this happens, right? Something happens, right? And everybody, if you can't come up with this now, right? You should, even if you don't have the great opening scene, you need to know the inciting incident. In your pitch, you need to know the inciting incident, right? You need to know the inciting incident. In Clerks, the inciting incident is when he finds out his fiance is getting engaged. In Napoleon Dynamite, inciting incident is when he finds out there's an election that Napoleon can help Pedro win. Little Miss Sunshine, the call to Little Miss Sunshine, right? Swingers, right? The Swingers is when the girlfriend, right, rejects him and he has to decide, is he going to go back, right? Big Fat Greek Wedding is when father rejects the potential non-Greek groom. Dazed and Confused is real simple. Sign the pledge, right? It's when the pledge, drug pledge, is handed to Pink, our hero, right? Juno, there's a great scene where she finds out she's pregnant, and that's not the, you know, there it is. She finds out she's pregnant. Not, oh my God, it's not just this happy high schooler. She is pregnant, and it changes her world. It changes her life, right? Changes her world, changes her life. Superbad, it's that typical high school thing. They get invited to a party that can possibly change their lives. So the one moment that you need, and when you're pitching your story, I'm going to ask you, I'm hopefully going to tell me, this is the thing that shakes up the world, that causes a potential of the story to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that your hero immediately commits to, or your protagonist immediately commits to the story. And the next series of scenes, right, are when the world or characters seem to prevent your hero, your protagonist, from committing to the goal, right? And often something's going to happen, right? You know, there is a family, like in Greek Wedding, who's it's not going to be that easy, right? But she's going to have to stand up to her father, right? In the hero's journey, which we will cover, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, this is the Star Wars pattern. We did this in Panda, right? Often the hero cannot believe that they are the person who is going to change the world, right? So, you know, Luke doesn't believe he's Luke. Neo doesn't believe, you know, that somehow that he can solve the Matrix, right? There's no way Poe possibly can be the Dragon Warrior, right? So, as you're thinking about your story, what stands in the way of your hero from committing to this goal? What is it? Is it a father? Is it a mother? Is it a job? Is it a circumstance, right? Is it the world? Is it a character, right? It's this, and we call this area the debate. Should I go? Meaning your protagonist, should I do it? Am I going to do it? What's preventing me? You know, and this is going to be another, you know, 5 scenes or so, right? You're gonna go 5 scenes. You're gonna have an inciting incident. You're gonna have 5 or more scenes that lead to one of the most important parts of your movie, and this is the end of Act 1, right? We're going to talk about act structure when we're plotting your movie, but act structure is really damn simple. Act 1 is the setup. Act 2 is the complication, where your hero changes and learns and grows. And Act 3 is where your hero gets everything that he, she, or they want, or does it, right? But there is going to be a huge event at the end of Act 1. It happens roughly 20 to 30 minutes into a movie. It's happens short in movies where we immediately are rooting and understand our hero. The first acts tend to be shorter. You know, we'll get into this when we talk about plotting, right? But there's going to be an event that completely locks in your story. There's no longer, do I want to try to help the rebels blow up the Death Star, but we're on our way, right? We're committed, right? There's something that happens. Aunt and uncle are killed. I'm stuck with this mentor, and I'm flying off on this mission that is going to get more complicated, right? The event that makes the story happen, right? In Sunshine, it's when the father has to convince the stepson who refuses to speak to get in the bus and go. He's the last one he could get in the bus and go. And what does the father make the commitment? If you go with us, and it works out, I'll let you join the Air Force, right? So there's this, boom, I convinced the stepson, we are on our way, right? It's the event that locks your story in. And this is key. It should be a pretty big thing that happens, right? We shift from asking the question in your first act, the scenes shift from who are these people? Why do we care about these people, to what happens next? It's all plot driven. What happens next? And when I have you develop a screenplay, we select the scenes for the entire movie. We select all of the scenes in the first act, we select all of the scenes in the second act, and we select all the scenes in the third act. This is a test to see, can you come up with 30 or so scenes? And then 30 is a minimum, because each scene is going to be 2 to 5 pages, right? And that's roughly going to end up, 30 scenes, 2 to 5 pages, say 3 pages, 90 minutes. 90 minutes is about what we want. 90 pages is the minimum we want for a movie, right? I'm talking for a feature film. So there is a pattern, right? There is a scene or a series of scenes that introduces the main character and main characters and why we care about them. There's something that happens that gives whatever your story is, the possibility of change. There is some reluctancy, and then there's an event that causes it to happen, right? Boom, boom, boom. It's like a three-part series of events that you need to be aware of as you're developing your story. Just imagine your character, and you can, if you don't want to select scenes now, you can write this out as a summary. You're summarizing. This is who my character is in the beginning. This is what he, she, or they, are afraid of. This is what they're lacking. This is what they're stuck in. This is what their world is like. This is what their parents are like. This happens, and there's a chance, there's an object that happens. There's an opportunity to get the family together and on the road, right? There's an opportunity to get to be the drummer in the band in Whiplash. There's an incident that happens, right? That sets your hero on a quest, and obstacles, meaning world and other characters, stand in the way, but a big event happens, and your hero is fully committed, right? Fully committed, right? So as you're getting out of your first act, these are some of the questions that I want you to ask, right? And this is when let's say you have your 5 to 15 scenes to set up your movie, your 3 sequences. Who is this character? Here's the inciting incident. Here's the reluctancy. Here's the lock-in. Do you have a time lock? If you have a time lock, I want to know the time lock by the end of Act 1, by the end of your setup. I want to know the time lock. If you have a time lock in your pitch, let me know right up front. What is the lock? And again, we went over the time lock on these movies, right? Dazed and Confused, 1 day. American Graffiti, 1 day to decide if you're going to sign the drug pledge. American Graffiti, 1 day to decide, are we going to go away to college or stay, right? Juno, 9 months. Superbad, right? Superbad, 1 day, right? Whiplash goes over a course of a semester, but we can see that even though it's not as specific, we can see a time lock. Napoleon Dynamite, which is the loosest movie of the sort of coming of age movies here, there is an election, and we know that the election is going to happen within this semester, right? So it's not a clear lock, but we know that there's pressure. Clerks, it's a day, right? Because they're trying to track the fiance down, right? Sunshine, they have 3 days to get to the contest, right? To get to the competition, right? So ask yourself, do you have a time lock? If you don't, why? Right? Why? And I'm going to ask you on Monday after you pitch your story, if there's not a time lock, I'm going to say, well, how long does this take? And this is a question you'd ask you. How long does your movie take, and why? Not like how many minutes is your movie, but is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it a semester? Is it a year? Is it a lifetime? Right? And the reason I want you to think about this and think about how long your movie takes is because by compressing it and making it as tight as possible, right? Maybe it does demand, a year. Maybe it does demand, the duration of a war, right? But you knowing this before you select the scenes and before you write it is very important, very important. Now, if you're writing one of these stories, the coming of age story, right? If you're writing a coming of age story, if you're writing a dream story, if you're writing a family story, right? this doesn't affect you at all, right? Rules to your world need to be established, you know, by the end of Act One. And what do we mean by rules of the world? Even in movies like Clerks, this is set in New Jersey, right? And New Jersey in the 90s, the rules to that world, it was done, you know, in the 90s. So the rules follow what the rules of New Jersey at this quick stop in the 90s took place. You know, Napoleon Dynamite, done, I think 2006, right? It was done in Idaho, right? Well, how did the rules to this world work? It was sort of a heightened reality, a little quirky, but how does this work, right? Sunshine Family. Now, so those of you, I know one of you is doing an anime. I think Sarah's doing an animated movie. Some of you are going to go. Some of you who are finishing scripts have higher stakes, higher concept movies. I know Richard has a horror that he's finished. He's all the way through the midpoint right now, right? The rules need to be established within the first 30 pages. Meaning, for instance, Richard's doing his horror film. There is a series of dark figures, ghost. We get to see them in action and kill right at the beginning, and then we get to see how they're affecting a young boy right in the beginning. By the time I get to page 30, I know exactly how the haunting is done. I know how the killing is done. I know what the terror is. So for the rest of the movie, I see how this works, right? And here's the cliche, I need to know what the kryptonite is. I need to know what the superpowers are, right? And I need to know it, and you need to tell me this in your pitch. You know, that, you know, Superman or Superwoman is invincible except for kryptonite, right? Whatever, you know, like whatever your mythos is, I need to know it. And you need to know it. Most importantly is you actually need to know this and need to think about this. As you get out of your first act, I asked you for stakes right at the top, but they need to lock down at the end of the first act. If your hero wants something and the goal is locked in and we know what they need to change, what's at stake, it better be really important to your hero. They must want it really, really badly. You know, like in the only life and death stakes based on the true story here is the Hurt Locker, right? The Army's elite EOD explosive ordnance disposal teams, right? The squad identifies, dismantles explosive devices and other bombs, right? There is a time lock, right? There's a time lock in the movie, but what's at stake? If they do not defuse the bomb, they die. We get to know these characters in the first act, crazy characters of the stake is their lives, and we care about them and we want them to live, right? In American Graffiti, it's finding your true happiness. The character's genuine happiness is in this. Juno, the stakes are pretty high. The stakes are, I got to find the right parent for this unborn child, right? What's at stake? Well, Juno's happiness is at stake. The happiness of this life is at stake, right? It needs to matter. And why do I want you to consider what's at stake and tell me what's at stake, right? I want you to tell me what's at stake, because if it doesn't really matter to that character, I'm not going to love your pitch. We're not going to love your pitch. And more importantly, when you write the script, we're not going to love your story, right? So these are concepts as I'm coming out of the first act. I want to know, do you have a lock? I want to know what your rules are. I want to know, what are the stakes? Now, here's something that you get to use, a tool. This is a tool for you in the first act, in the first half of the second act, coincidence. What is coincidence? Coincidence is the randomness, when people who haven't seen each other in years suddenly run into each other, when random acts happen. This is how stories start. And we believe in coincidences to set up. This is key. This is a key concept. Coincidences set up. They do not resolve. So in your toolbox as a storyteller, you get to have characters run into each other, have the cute meet, they call it in a romantic comedy, where the characters randomly will run into each other, right? Something happens, right? Something happens. Your character's hypnotized, you know, your character makes a wish, right? It happens to be somewhere, right? A coincidence is completely acceptable in the first part of your movie. So as you're coming up with scenes, don't be afraid of coincidences in the beginning. Once you get past your midpoint, That's halfway through your story. If you rely on coincidences, people randomly showing up, or coincidentally, there's a gun in a room that solves the problem, you lose our confidence in you as a storyteller. Coincidences don't resolve, characters resolve. Coincidences cause conflict, cause stories. Characters, your character resolves the story. Now, a concept that is hard to talk about, and for those of you pitching the story, the tone. What is tone? Tone is how your character feels, right? When we talked about in the hook, it's all up here, the tone. It's often hard to know what your tone is if you haven't written anything, right? So for those of you who are developing your story, you're imagining your story has a darkness, a lightness, it's funny, it's dramatic, right? Tone is important, right? And the importance of tone is that, and you're going to discover your tone when you write it, is that you're consistent, right? You do not radically shift tone. And what do I mean by that? If you're writing a comedy, let's say you're writing a hangover type of a comedy, or if you're writing a Dumb and Dumber type of a comedy, you're writing a silly, a comedy that's not going to be too dramatic, a radical dark shift is the end of the story. We don't care about the story. Now, if your story starts out, as it appears like people are going to be happy, and it suddenly morphs into something very dark, a Silence of the Lambs, a Seven, something like that, and there's a progression from light to dark, that's fine, right? I'm going to do a whole tone exercise with the first time writers after we write your first act. This is for those of you who are working on a script, though, who are digging into a script. What is your tone? How dark? How light? How does your tone? What is your tone after your first act? Try to think of a movie that feels like yours in tone, like that has a heaviness, has a lightness, has the same sort of comedy. What type of comedy is it? What type of drama is it? There's a big difference between, a rom-com, or something that's more slapstick. There's, a heavy drama, or some, just like a Jerry Maguire, sort of like a dramatic film that does not get too heavy. I want to know what the tone is if you are working on your screenplay, and you need to be able to identify it and talk about it. And the key is no radical shift. You're not going from dark to light, right? Dark to light. So this is what I want you to do. All of you probably, this is for those of you who have written your first act, right? Have plotted out your first act, have thought right now, this first time you're thinking of your first act, right? It's also for those of you who, as if there's something wrong with your script, right? And you don't quite know how to end your screenplay. This is something that you should have done already, right? You should come up as you're doing story development. You should know exactly, what you're going to end, how you're going to end up. Come up with your end before you figure out the middle, right? The middle, right? The middle is the movie. It's the character arc. It's the change, right? The middle is everything. The middle is the middle is why we invest in characters. The middle is the roller coaster up and down. It's where we hook in, and we're rooting for your character to win the fight, to get the love, right? In order for you to get through that, think of your story right now. How do you want it to end? I don't care if you don't have the scene in mind, but how do you want it to end? Is Olive going to win Little Miss Sunshine? No, she's going to lose, but the family is going to be intact, right? That by knowing where we're going, and knowing how it's going to end, it's going to be a dark ending. It's going to be a happy ending. This is why it's crucial for you to know this, because if it's going to end well, then we're going to make it as hard as possible to get there. I say character and conflict, we're getting down to test, right? But knowing how you're going to end it will allow you to choose the scenes to get you to that end, right? So take time over this week, right? Those of you who are going to be pitching your stories, how is it going to end? And I want to know in your pitch how it ends, right? You're not in your pitch. I don't care if you don't have all the middle worked out. I kind of want to see how it's set up, what causes the story to happen, right? I want some major turning points along the way, but how does it end? If you, and this is what a writer does. A writer makes a specific choice. This is what writing is. You've named your characters. You've given your characters specific goals. You've given your characters ages. You're making specific choices. And now you have these 6 characters. You've chosen the character who's shaping your story. Now you're going to decide, is my character going to get this or not? And you're going to attempt to construct your story that way and write your story that way and plot your story that way and create conflict to have your story end the way. And this goes for a short film too. Quicker setup. How does it end? How does it end, right? How does it end, right? And then the rest of, when you have the rest of this lecture, all of the following lectures are, how do we structure your story? How do we get your story to work? How do we get the middle to work, right? One thing you're going to think about, this is going to, as you're talking through your story, right? Always be simplifying, always be focusing, right? I'm going to let the fire truck go by. Those of you who have written a first act, those of you who have written a first draft, right? Are you getting everything out of those 6 core characters that you thought, right? You threw your first act. I haven't used 2 or 3 of them. Maybe they aren't those primary characters that we talked about, those core characters. Maybe someone needs to be put off to the side, eliminated, or absorbed into another character. This strengthens scripts. When we are adapting, right, from other materials, from novels, from graphic novels, from myth stories, often there's too many characters, and you're trying to put them all in. But you see, when we go back to this concept right here, when we're talking about your characters, right, the rest of the characters, well, this is where we go back to character function, protagonist, antagonist, mentor, ally, right? And then there's an ally for the antagonist and the protagonist. Maybe you have too many characters, or maybe you have the wrong type of characters. And the only way you're going to find this out is by actually selecting the scenes and trying to write the scenes. By combining a character, you can get more out of one stronger character, right? With more purpose, right? With more purpose. And you're going to do this. You're going to really look hard at this when you get through your first act. You're going to really, as you get through your second act, your third act, you're going to really look who we're losing through the second act. How valuable are they through the second act? But those of you who are pitching, right? You have your 6 characters. It's going to be tough in your pitch, right? But if you pitch and you're pitching and I hear characters there's 3 friends and I can't tell the difference between 2 of them, right? I'm going to ask you in your pitch, well, what's the difference between, this ally and that ally? And if you don't know, right, it might be an indication in your pitch where you catch this. Often you're not going to find this out until you put your characters in action. Now, we're getting into second act stuff. And again, I don't want you to think about, just think beginning, middle, and end now. I'm going to take you through complete act structure. I'm going to take you through the hero's journey. I'm going to take you through everything you need to know plotting. We're just talking about, these are concepts, right? This is one thing that you need to do while you are developing your story, right? You need to challenge. You need to challenge. And this is what your second act, this is my big sort of note for your second act. The second act is a huge, huge, huge test. Everything is a test. Everything is a test. That is a conflict. That is an obstacle that needs to be overcome for your character to get what? To achieve what? To achieve this goal that you've established in your first act, right? Right. So test, test, test. Your second act, the middle of your story, I want to hear, this is what I want to hear in some of your pitches. What are some of the big obstacles, right? What's the first time you encounter your witch, your Darth Vader, right? What's the big thing that happens that tests your character, that your character has to pass? There are some huge moments in your second act, right? Second act. And one way to come up with these tests before you put them down is, what is your character good at? What's your character comfort is? What's your character afraid of, right? The second act is when the exact opposite shows up. The character who your character does not want to face, but must face, right? The polar opposite. Challenge, challenge, challenge. If you're doing one of these stories and it's based on you, right? It's your high school experience. It's your family experience, right? It's your dream. You're not going to want it to be hard on yourself. You're really not going to want to be hard on yourself, right? So you got to realize this is not you. This was a different version of you, a different version of your of a friend, of a loved one, right? You got to challenge them. You got to make it more dramatic or more comedic than it really was in life, right? Really was life. Take the seeds of reality and make them better, make them more dramatic. Now I'm going to give you a concept. Remember, we talked about in character development. I talked about in character development. We get beyond types, right? When we get down to secrets, right? Secrets. What are your characters hiding, right? What are your characters are hiding, right? You should study movies like The Departed, right? But this really, if you're doing horror, if you're doing a thriller, the concept of dramatic irony is the most important concept, and one of the most important concepts you will ever use in your storytelling, right? And what is dramatic irony? It's real simple, right? There's something bad. There's something bad that can possibly happen, right? There's something bad that can happen to your character. The character walks into the house. There's someone in the room there's someone in that house who could do something harmful to them, right? Maybe literally if it's a horror film, maybe emotionally, there's someone in there with a loved one having an affair, right? There's some damage that can be done, right? You can choose to, as you're telling me the stories, as you're pitching the stories, or maybe your first draft as you're writing your stories, you're trying to surprise me. You're saying, no, I'm going to surprise, right? And wow, we walk into the house and you jump out and there's a killer, right? Oh, wow, I'm surprised, right? Or we're into a house and there's a bomb. There's the Hitchcockian bomb that blows up, right? And it's a surprise, right? Think about it though. You want your audience, you want your reader, in the case of the screenplay, in the case of the movie, you want your audience. When you're pitching, when I'm listening, you want to give up. You want to give up the bad news. You want to tell me about the affair. You want to tell me about the killer in the house. You want to tell me about the bad thing that the wife or the husband or the lover has done to the other one. And you want to show it to us. Who's us? Your reader, your audience. This is the key to writing your second act. This is the key to writing your story, is showing the bad, right? Always reveal bad news, right? As quickly as you can, give it away. It creates suspense. Your first act, right? If you have a time lock, right? If you have a time lock, right? And here we are, we're locked up, right? We have a time lock. After about 20 or 30 pages, I'm held in suspense. I'm waiting to find out, will this goal be achieved? Will we get to Little Miss Sunshine? Get the book deal, get to Little Miss Sunshine. Will Pink decide to abandon all of his social groups and sign this pledge? We're waiting, right? But what we do is as you're going through the movie, you show us the potential bad that can happen, right? And what happens? We hook into it. We see the literal killer in the house before the protagonist does, or the other characters do. And when your characters are walking through the house and we know they're getting closer, we're like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Oh my God, don't do. And then when we do, when we know. There's a great example of this in a movie called Silence of the Lambs, Oscar-winning suspense horror film. The film completely holds up, right? When our protagonist she doesn't know she's in the killer's house, right? She does not know she's in Buffalo Bill's house, right? And when we realize she's in the house and she doesn't know she's in the house, we're just like literally talking to her, get out, get out, get out. Because we say it's a higher concept movie where the characters developed, we care about the characters, but it works if I care about your character, right? And you show me the killer before the character knows the killer, I'm glued. I'm glued. And then you can play with us. You can toy with us, right? When we do scene study, I will show you scenes that do this, right? Where we know more. And as you're pitching your story, those of you who are going to be pitching your story, right, do you have one of these moments, right? Where there is that secret that can be found out and is almost found out and we know it. Incorporate that into your pitch, right? You have written a second act and it's not really holding up together, right? You have used too much surprise. You have not used suspense, right? And that goes on to the second part of it, right? Don't ever show us good news, meaning sleeping guard, right? Killer has left, right? Let's say the killer's not in there, but the killer has been in there, but the killer's not going to be in there. Don't show us the killer's not in there. Let us think the killer might be in there because the killer is usually in there. You hold our attention, right? And your whole goal is to hook me, your reader, hook me, your viewer in. And in addition to structuring, right, Act 2, right? Act 2, the best way to do this is to use dramatic irony. Show. So let's talk about, what Act 2 is. The start of Act 2, right? As the beginning of, you've set up, in your pitch, in your story, you've set up this character we care about, something's happened to this character, and the character has now made a commitment, right? We're on this quest. We're literally on a quest, right? Initially, the quest seems achievable, right? Things are going to happen. Now, one thing you realize, and we'll get into this in more detail when we do Act 2 scene study or Act 2 study, is that your hero typically isn't ready to face the villain, isn't ready to solve the problem until we get much later on, deeper into the second act, really into the third act, right? So the beginning of Act 2, it's like the quest is beginning. It seems achievable, right? It seems like we dropped this robot off. It's got the plans of the Death Star. The rebels are going to kill it. The movie can possibly be over, right? We're skipping down our yellow brick road. All we got to do is get to this wonderful wizard. He'll get us home, right? It seems achievable, right? It seems achievable. Now, this is a scene that you should be thinking about right now. Your hero's on the way. Something's going to happen 3, 4, 5 scenes in where it's not achievable anymore. There's a witch literally setting friends on fire, right? It's not going to be as easy. The planet blows up, right? There's no place to take the plans to the Death Star because the whole world has blown up that could solve this problem. Something has happened, right? We've lost the groom, right? Oh, all we got to do is go to this wedding chapel and we get the information from the doctor. He said one of you got married. We go to the wedding chapel. We figure out that the character Stu actually got married. Okay, maybe we're going to sort this thing out. Bam, it gets serious. A gangster, right? A gangster shoots at us. The stakes of suddenly mortal jeopardy. This is serious. Not only do we need to find the groom, but somebody's shooting at us and wants to kill us. Why, right? Raising the stakes. What is the scene? What is your witch on the yellow brick road? What is your planet getting blown up, right? What is your bus breaking down in sunshine? What is it that raises the stakes? And it's often a series of things. And one thing you got to realize, the stakes continue to rise. That means a story goes from bad to worse, right? That's what your second act is. It's going to get harder. It's going to get harder. Now, there's always a section in a movie, and this is like the inciting incident, the midpoint, right? The midpoint of a movie is, I'm going to talk sort of like esoterically about it. There's a shift in your protagonist's quest, where your protagonist stops listening to others, going to take responsibility for her quest, for their quest, right? The big decision, right? I am now going to stop listening to my allies. I am going to take this seriously, right? It's a big moment, and it's a big turning point, right? It's a big turning point. I hear too many people talk about the midpoint, and it's not defined well enough. I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. It's the moment when everything points to the end of the movie. It's the moment when everything points to the end of the movie. I was on a story, lucky to be in a story conference and hearing the Russo brothers talk about the Avengers and what they did, and it was so clearly defined. The movie they say to study is Goodfellas. Perfect movie, kind of sad considering what just happened, but there's a moment in the middle of every movie where you're on this quest and everything is pointing to the climax, and the decision that your hero makes points to the climax. Let me give you some examples, right? Wizard of Oz. We get to Oz halfway through the movie. There's this wizard, wizard is not very nice, mean to all of the friends, scares the lion, Scarecrow, Tin Man, everybody's scared. And it's Dorothy who stands up and says, you don't be mean to my friends. And she stands up, and then from this point on, the wizard gives her an impossible task and says, okay, go get the witch's broom. Go get the witch's broom. You got to go face, right? The end, you got to go face in order to get what you want. You got to go to the most dangerous place, right? And this is where this information is revealed, and we see this story snap into focus, right? Snap into focus, right? And this is the point often when your hero loses the mentors. Obi-Wan's going to be dead. Luke still has the plans. He's going to get back, but he's going to have to come up and blow it up himself, right? This is a turning point. We get the plans. We escape from the trash compactor with the plans. We lose mentor. We go down, and we're going to have to get back up to try to blow it up, right? This big test is what we're moving towards. But there's a moment in your movie, right? And you should think about this. What is the moment where your hero assumes responsibility? Michael Arndt, who wrote, won an Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine, told me to tell you that this is the perfectly structured story. This is the perfect structure to the story. And the midpoint is really real clear. Grandpa, whose whole idea was working with Olive to get her in this beauty contest, he dies. He dies of the drug overdose. He's in the hospital. The movie seems to be over, right? And Dad decides that we're going to go on. We're going to go on. And he gets the family together, and they steal grandfather, his father's body, out of the hospital. That's the midpoint. Dad takes action, and he takes the body out of the hospital because the hospital won't release them. They're stuck there, and the clock is running out. Remember, the clock is running out. We have 3 days. Now we only have like 4 hours to get to the contest, right? But Dad makes a decision that they get the body into the family. They're on the road, right? On the road. So there's a big moment. You should think about, what is that moment where your whole story is pointing to the end? You should know that. You should be thinking this through. If you have a finished screenplay, it's not clear, right? It's not clear. Maybe you have a series of muddled scenes, and you need a stronger Oz moment, right? You need a stronger Death Star escape moment, right? It's big, right? And it leads to the most important part of the story. And this is the second half of the second act. And why is the second half of the second act the most important part of the story? This is where your hero changes. Joseph Campbell calls this, in the hero's journey, the supreme ordeal. But this is when we talk about character arc, there is an arc. There is a change that happens, right? So as you're thinking about your story, what is the test? Not your hero solving the goal, but what is the test, right? What is the thing, right? the test, what getting in, we have to get into the witch's castle, right? We have to get into the witch's castle, and we have to get that broom, right? It's the big test. In the Rocky movies and the Creed movies, right? The big test is the training, right? Getting to the top of those stairs. I'm ready for the fight, right? I'm ready for the fight, right? What is it? What is it your character has to face in order to be ready to get what he, she, or they want, right? What is that test, right? What is the test? Sunshine, right? It's the drive with grandpa's body to the contest, right? It's that accumulates with the blind, not the blind, the silent stepson realizing that he's colorblind. He doesn't pass the test, and he screams, and the bus pulls over, and now it looks like the movie, right? Here's this test, and dad has to try to figure out, how do we get this kid? He's called everybody. He's finally spoken, which is a very powerful moment. He's spoken. He said, you're the uncle you tried to kill, you're a suicide. He looks at the parents, you guys are going to get divorced, right? You're a loser. And he calls and he speaks the truth. It's such a genius moment, because it's the first time he speaks, and he says everything angrily that is true, and he runs away. And dad, Richard, does not go down and try to use one of his philosophies. He simply looks at Olive and motions for Olive to go down. And he knows that he's not the one issue, but and Olive goes down, and she simply puts her head on his shoulder, and he knows that he's got to get back in the car, and he gets back in the car, and they get back in the car, and they make it, right? They kind of make it. They make it to the competition, right? It's not escaping the Death Star. It's not killing the witch, right? But it's, or getting trapped in the witch's castle and getting out of the witch's castle. But it's a moment that shows growth and change, right? Growth and change. And that's what we're looking for. Now, it's going to be hard for those of you pitching your story to know what your test is. You should know what the midpoint is, but you should generally know, like the movie that just came out, Maverick, Top Gun Maverick. There's a literal test. They got to decide. They got this group of pilots who have to fly in these canyons, and they're going to have to destroy these uranium mines to prevent a possible nuclear war. But it's an impossible flight that can't be done, and they all fail the test. They're all failing the test until our hero Maverick steals a plane and shows that the test can be done, and he passes the test, and therefore he actually is going to go on the mission, right? But there's a big test in every movie, and the best part, if you've seen Top Gun, I'm blowing, I shouldn't say anything, but if you've seen Top Gun, the best part isn't the end when they're actually having a fight. The best part is when Maverick shows that the test can be passed, right? And that's when we're moving out of the second act. We're moving out of the second act, and we're moving towards a point like we've escaped the Death Star, right? We've gotten out of the castle. We've gotten out of the castle. We're still alive. There's usually a really, really low point, right? The lasers are pointed on the rebel base, right? The villain is ready to strike. The problem seems unsolvable, right? We got the wrong Doug. Right? We won all the money. This is a problem movie. We won all the money. We counted cards. We pulled it together. We got the wrong Doug. Right? Holy crap, we got the wrong Doug. Right? My favorite example of this, and it's a beautifully structured movie, is a movie called Saving Private Ryan, and it's a very linear movie. Right? We literally land with a group. A war soldier, the Tom Hanks soldier, and on D-Day, and we have to struggle. The first act is to get up over D-Day, get up, kill the Nazis, and make it and establish a base, and then suddenly get the quest to go find this soldier who's all of his brothers have died, and assemble a team, right? assemble a team, get on the road, and their quest, and they find the wrong Ryan. All of these things happen. They finally find the right Ryan, right? But they're trapped, right? They pass the big test, they fight their way in, they get there, it's great, here's the right Ryan. Unbelievable, we've lost people along the way. We're trapped and Ryan won't leave, and the Germans are coming, and we got to protect his bridge. This is lowest low. We're all going to stay here. It looks like we're going to die, right? It looks like we're going to die. It's fantastic, right? And this is immediately followed by an epiphany. I like to say epiphany, but most people love epiphany, right? What an epiphany is an English term, you know, James Joyce, Ulysses, epiphany, sudden realization. There's a moment of clarity. And those of you pitching your stories, I don't expect you to know, you know, the epiphany in your pitch, right? But those of you who have plotted your stories, written your stories, right? Look at the end of your second act. And when you go down at the end of your second act, right? Everything that has happened, right? All of the ups and downs, all of the dramatic irony that you've used, the midpoint where we take responsibility, we're going to stand up, we're going to solve the problem or defeat the villain, we're tested, and we've passed the test, but man, the stakes are really high, really, really high. There's a sudden realization, a moment of clarity where your hero says, you know what, maybe I do understand what the Force is. You know, maybe, just maybe, I can do this. And that's how we want to feel at the end of the second act, that there's hope, right? There's hope. The easiest thing to talk about and the easiest thing to do is to talk about your climax. I want to know how your movie ends. This is for those of you who are pitching it, right? And maybe you do have spectacular Death Star exploding climax. Maybe you have the Top Gun, I won't blow the movie, but we have the climax where we actually get to see action. We get to see Maverick in actual combat, and we get to see him redeem the loss of his best friend with Goose's son, right? We get to see this climax. You all should know kind of how big, what that big moment, that's one of the big moments that you should know. Now, when you write your climax, it's not one scene, it's a really fat part of your movie, and you got to really pay it off. You got to really pay it off. But for the pitch, right, I want you to be able to tell me the climax. This is what I want to know when you're pitching your movie. I want you to give me the hook, the hero, the goal, the dramatic need, what the problem is. And then as you're talking about it, this is how I imagine my character in the beginning of the story, right? He's this overly arrogant motivational speaker, right? Who's run his family into bankruptcy. And then he sees this dysfunctional family, 6 of them, who do not get along. And suddenly there's this opportunity from his daughter, who is the least likely person who can be a beauty queen. She gets a call to be in a contest that will happen to just take him right where he needs to go to get his book deal, right? And he has to convince this difficult group to get into a bus and to ride together to Sunshine, right? There's your first act. On the road, there's all sorts of bumps. The bus breaks. He loses the book deal. Things appear to be falling apart, and they really fall apart when the father dies of an overdose. They're in the hospital. All seems lost. But Richard has an epiphany. Richard has not an epiphany. Richard has this realization that, you know what, I'm going to go to the end of this movie. I'm going to go to the end of this movie. I'm going to fulfill my father's dream. I don't care if we're going to make money or not. Let's get the family to steal the body, put it in the back of the car. And there's a body in the back of the car, and it's great. They get pulled over by a cop. Dramatic irony. We know there's a body in the car. The cop doesn't know there's a body in the car. The cop opens the back. We think he's gonna, you know, figure it out. He doesn't. There's some I guess they were like magazines, adult magazines in the back that the cop finds, and the joke is he takes them, he gives them the magazines, they body in, they're on their way. Then the big test happens when the stepson finally speaks, when he realizes he can't be a pilot and challenges everybody, but Richard still manages to send all of them there, and they get to the contest, and guess what? They ran out of time. There's no time. Sorry, you're late. and he gets to his knees and he begs. He begs. This is his moment of clarity. He begs. And a clerk puts them into the contest. And Olive's ready to go compete for the contest. And this is the climax. She's going to go to the contest, and we realize Richard realizes the worst possible thing for her. And right as she's about to humiliate herself doing this semi-striptease dance and not the beauty pageant clothes that everybody's in, he jumps up on the stage and makes a fool of himself, saving his daughter, and the whole family jumps on the stage. And they're all one big happy family with this new order together. They're broke. They're don't appear to be any stability, yet they're a unit. They can make this broken car literally work together. That's the story. That's the story. I just did it in like 2.5 minutes. That's the story of Little Miss Sunshine, right? Now, one thing that that you can throw in at the end of your pitch, or what are the themes? What are we learning, right? We're learning there's nothing more important than family. This is what Richard learns. There's nothing more important than the love of family. That's what it is. But how do you figure your theme out? I don't want you to tell me any theme at the top of your pitch, right? I don't want you to tell me the theme at the top of your pitch. I want you to tell me this at the top of your pitch. What kind of story is it? Who do we follow? Richard, right? What's his goal? He wants to get the family on the road to Sunshine, really, to make the book deal. What is his need? He really needs to let go of being Mr. Know-it-all and become a father, right? And it's a problem story. They have 3 days, right, to get the little Sunshine before the family falls apart, right? They've got the nice clock on it. There's not really a villain. Everybody's gonna take it. It's a problem. We got to get there by this time. It's a problem. We have only so much time to get there, right? That's what I want to hear, right? And then I want you to walk me through your story. I want you to tell me how it starts out, just like I did, how it complicates, how he gets dedicated, why he gets them on the road, get them on the road, right? And talk me through some of the high points, some of the problems, the broken down car, we're going to push it anyways, right? Grandfather dying, we're going to work together to get him out. Getting the stepson back into the car, right? You should be able to do this, think your way through your story, right? This would be like do a full-on pitch. Now, for those of you, most of you might not have the detail by Monday. I'm hoping that you have the detail by Monday just by asking yourself these questions. And this is where I'm getting at for those of you who are pitching. And those of you who have written your story, actually, if you can't tell me, if you can't talk through your story, right, by answering these questions, spinal questions, and key story concepts, how's your setup? What's your inciting incident? What makes your story happen? Is it lock? What is the lock? How do the rules work? What are the stakes, right? What kind of story is it, right? What would give me some key dramatic irony, right? How do the stakes rise in Act 2? What is the midpoint, right? What's the big test? What's the lowest low? What's your climax? If you can't talk your way through this is probably not the story for you, right? And if you can't do this in something you've written, man, what a structural mess. If you've developed this with me, you won't have this problem, because I will not let you write a story until we've selected the scenes first. And don't worry, when you're pitching this, it doesn't have to be perfect on your pitch. This is not a studio pitch. You're not doing a studio pitch, right? I'm looking more for your elevator pitch, but I eventually want you to be able to write this story. And this checking your story step-by-step story development is a roadmap for you to try to think about your story, right? Think about some of your story is just going to flow out, right? That's good. That's good, right? But some of you have to work a little harder. That's also good. It doesn't matter how easy or hard it is to get there. It just matters that you do get there. And one thing that the class will move to, or I'm going to move to, is there are principles and there is a structure that you need to be aware of. And I'm not doing this on the pitch, right? But there's structure you need to be aware of that will hold our attention and that audiences respond to. But what you need more than anything is you need characters. You need characters with names, with goals. You need a character that provides a goal that gives a structure and needs to have a big change in order to achieve this. You need a problem that needs to be overcome, or a person / villain that needs to be overcome, right? And then there has to be a pattern. There needs to be scenes that show us who we care about and why we care about them. Something has to happen that suggests there's change possible. Something has to happen that makes us commit to it, right? You need this, and then you need the flow, right? You need a major setback, you need a commitment, you need a test, you need a low, you need an understanding, and you need a climax. And then you need to put it all back together at the end. You need to reestablish the order. This is what happened. This is what my story is like now. And this is how they've changed. And when I look at the beginning and I look at the end, it needs to be a dramatic change in this character who you've named and who wanted something. And the character is riding off to an Aerosmith concert and threw the drug pledge in the coach's face, right? This family is driving off together, broke but happy, right? Broke but happy, right? That's what I'm looking for. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a pattern. I'm looking for beginning, middle, and end. I want you to be able to tell me your story. The first thing, before you write your story, you need to be able to tell me your story. And the story will follow by just going through these 2 lectures and running your ideas through these 2 lectures. The story and character development, and then checking your story lecture. You should have a feeling, well, when you're pitching this, you should have some details. Now, it would be cool. It's not due until Wednesday, but it would be cool on Monday if you wrote up, if you had, and I don't care, you can have your 250 words written up, right? But what you might do, you might even have the 250 words is sort of like your hook, hero, whatever. You might have a paragraph that describes the major turning points of your first act, the major turning points of your second act, and how it wraps up. You might have 4 paragraphs, right? That's not required for this class, right? But it's not a bad thing to do, right? Your 250 words gives us an idea what the story is about, what's at stake at the story. Then you can write a paragraph about the major things that happen in the beginning, the major things happen in the middle, the major things that happen in the end, right? By putting it down on paper, right, would be good. But I really want you, Kevin, Sarah, Sebastian, to be able to tell me your story when we're done. I would be, tell me your story when you're done. All right, so I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to stop the recording.